Level 1. Trash. The forgettable or poorly written villains fail to pose a real threat or have meaningful depth, focusing only on short-sighted pursuits of power and profit instead of being masterminds. Steppenwolf, Justice League 2017. He is what happens when a villain is designed by a checklist instead of a writer. Big horns? Check. Glowing eyes? Check. Zero personality? Absolutely. This dude shows up talking about mother boxes like we're supposed to care, but he has the emotional depth of a loading screen. His motivation basically boils down to, my boss will like me again, which is wild for a supposed world-ending threat. Every scene he's in feels like extended CGI noise, not menace. He's not intimidating, not memorable, and definitely not iconic. When your biggest contribution to the movie is making people say, bring back the Snyder Cut, you've already lost. Steppenwolf isn't scary, he's just loud, shiny, and painfully empty. Malekith, Thor, The Dark World. He might be the most aggressively forgettable villain Marvel has ever produced, and that's saying something. Played by Christopher Eccleston, an actor who can act, yet somehow ends up doing absolutely nothing. His plan, darkness, his personality, also darkness. That's it. No charisma, no humor, no menace, just pale elf guy whispering about eternal night. Thor, Loki, and even side characters completely overshadow him at every turn. You could replace Malekith with a dark cloud, and the movie wouldn't change. He doesn't challenge Thor emotionally, physically, or morally. He's just there. And when a villain's biggest crime is being boring, that's worse than being bad. Malekith isn't trash because he's offensive. He's trash because nobody remembers him 5 minutes after the credits roll. The Mandarin, Iron Man 3. He is bold, sure, but bold doesn't mean good. Marvel hyped up a terrifying terrorist mastermind, only to reveal he's actually Trevor Slattery, a drunk actor who can't even remember his own lines. As a joke, funny. As a villain, absolutely tragic. This character took years of comic book legacy and flushed it for a punchline. The threat instantly evaporates, and Iron Man loses a serious ideological enemy. Instead of fear, we get sitcom energy. The twist didn't elevate the story, it deflated it. Trevor works as comic relief, not as the Mandarin. Turning a legendary villain into a meme automatically earns you level 1 status. Trash, with extra cringe on top. Level 2, bad. Villains who have a clear goal but are either incompetent, annoying, or easily defeated. Prince Hans, Frozen. He is technically a villain, but let's be real. This man didn't outsmart anyone. The plot just handed him the win button at the last second. For most of the movie, he's a polite, slightly bland Disney prince with 0 red flags. Then, suddenly, boom, evil monologue unlocked. There's no slow burn, no chess master energy, no, oh wow, it was right in front of us moment. It feels less like a calculated betrayal, and more like the writers checking their watches. Hans isn't threatening, intimidating, or even clever. He just benefits from Elsa being isolated and Anna being unlucky. He's bad in the moral sense, sure, but as a villain, he lacks presence, build-up, and impact. He's not trash, but he's definitely riding the bench of villain history. Whiplash, Iron Man 2. He should have been scary. The man had a legit vendetta, matching tech, and a solid reason to hate Tony Stark. On paper, that's prime villain material. In execution, not so much. Most of the movie he's either sulking, getting arrested, or being played like a fiddle by Justin Hammer. His big Monaco entrance is cool, but after that, the intimidation drops off a cliff. He never really challenges Tony mentally or emotionally, and by the final act, he feels more like a side quest than the main threat. When your villain's most memorable trait is liking birds and mumbling angrily, something went wrong. Whiplash isn't awful. He's just undercooked, underused, and never quite earns that final boss energy. Darren Cross, Ant-Man. He is the definition of corporate villain starter pack. Evil CEO, unstable personality, and a tech suit that's just the heroes but worse. He works as a contrast to Scott Lang. But that's about as deep as it gets. There's no ideology, no grand vision, just greed and ego on autopilot. His descent into madness feels rushed, like the movie needed him to be evil now. So he just snaps. Yellow Jacket looks cool, but Darren himself never feels dangerous enough to justify the final showdown. He's serviceable, functional, and forgettable. Not offensively bad, not remotely great. Level 2 villains like Darren Cross exist to be defeated and immediately replaced. And that's exactly what happened. Level 3. Mid. The average Joes of villainy? They do their job well enough for the movie to work, but you won't be talking about them a week later. General Hux, Star Wars sequels. He had potential. When he's introduced, he's intense, ideological, and genuinely terrifying. Especially during that Force Awakens speech where he's basically Space Hitler with a microphone. For a moment, it feels like we're getting a ruthless military mind to rival Darth Vader's legacy. Then the sequels happen. Suddenly, Hux is getting tossed around, mocked, and turned into comic relief. He's no longer a feared general. He's the punchline standing next to Kylo Ren. By the time he's revealed as a spy, it feels less like a clever twist and more like a shrug. Hux never fully commits to being dangerous or funny, so he lands awkwardly in between. Not bad, not great, just painfully mid. Caecilius, Doctor Strange. Caecilius is the textbook definition of a Phase 1 villain. He's well acted, visually cool, and his motivation actually makes sense. Immortality, freedom from time, escape from suffering, fair enough. The problem is he's clearly not the main event. The movie treats him like a tutorial boss meant to introduce Doctor Strange to magic, not truly challenge him. Dormammu steals his thunder so hard that Caecilius instantly feels disposable. He never gets a big character moment or lasting impact, and once he's gone, nobody really misses him. He does his job, pushes the hero forward, and exits stage left. That's not trash. It's competent. But competence without memorability puts you squarely in mid-tier villain territory. Ares, Wonder Woman. He works fine. As a reveal, he makes sense thematically. The god of war hiding in plain sight, influencing humanity instead of directly controlling it. That's a solid idea. The issue is execution. He barely appears until the final act, so the emotional weight never fully lands. Once he transforms, the movie shifts into a CGI-heavy boss fight that feels more generic than mythic. He challenges Diana physically, but not deeply enough philosophically, to elevate him into greatness. Ares isn't embarrassing, and he's not forgettable. He's just average. A serviceable final hurdle for the hero, not an iconic presence. And that's the curse of level 3 villains. Decent, logical, but ultimately mid. Level 4. Okay. Respectable antagonists. They have some style, a decent motive, and give the hero a genuine run for their money. Bane, The Dark Knight Rises. He walks into Gotham like a force of nature, physically dominant, tactically smart, and speaking in that weirdly calm, terrifying voice that makes every sentence sound important. From the jump, he breaks Batman, literally and symbolically, which already puts him above average. The problem is timing. He follows Heath Ledger's Joker, and that shadow is unavoidable. Compared to Joker's chaos and psychological warfare, Bane feels more like a military commander than a personal nightmare. His ideology is interesting, his control over Gotham is impressive, but the emotional connection never fully hits. Then, the late-game reveal undercuts some of his menace. Still, Bane is effective, memorable, and intimidating. Not legendary, not mid. Solidly okay, flirting with greatness but never quite crossing the line. Ultron. Avengers. Age of Ultron. He's one of those villains who should have been elite. His concept is terrifying. An AI that looks at humanity and decides we're the problem. And, to his credit, he has personality, sarcastic, angry, and unsettlingly human. James Spader's voice work carries a lot of weight here. Ultron feels present, quotable, and philosophically interesting. The issue is execution. The movie undercuts his threat with jokes and rapid pacing, so he never fully breathes as a world-ending menace. His plan makes sense, his logic is cold, but the stakes don't linger long enough. Even so, Ultron sticks in people's minds. He's not forgettable, not embarrassing, just slightly undercooked. That balance keeps him firmly in the okay tier. Flawed, but far from weak. Scar, the Lion King. Scar is villainy done the classic way. He's jealous, manipulative, intelligent, and cruel, not through brute force, but through words and strategy. He doesn't overpower Mufasa. He engineers his downfall. That alone earns respect. Scar rules through fear, gaslighting, and alliances, which makes him effective for a long stretch of the story. His Shakespearean flair, sarcastic wit, and memorable songs elevate him beyond a basic antagonist. However, he lacks physical dominance and eventually collapses under his own cowardice. Scar isn't the most complex villain ever, but he doesn't need to be. He works perfectly within the story's scope. That's why he lands at level 4, a timeless, effective, okay-to-good villain who shaped many childhoods without redefining the genre. Level 5, good. Villains who elevate the movie. They are well-written, often charismatic, and you might even understand their point of view. Killmonger, Black Panther. Killmonger is the point where villains stop being wrong and start being understandable. His anger isn't random, and his pain isn't cartoonish. It's rooted in real history, real oppression, and real abandonment. That's what makes him dangerous. He isn't trying to destroy the world just because. He wants to flip the power structure that kept him and people like him powerless. And the scariest part? He's not entirely wrong. Killmonger challenges T'Challa ideologically, not just physically, forcing the hero to question Wakanda's isolation and privilege. Michael B. Jordan brings raw intensity, making every scene feel personal. When a villain makes the audience nod along before pulling back like, wait, hold on, that's elite villain writing. Killmonger isn't just good, he changes the hero forever. Captain Vidal, Pan's Labyrinth. Captain Vidal is proof that you don't need superpowers to be terrifying. No magic, no monsters, just authority, cruelty, and absolute control. He represents fascism in its purest form, cold, methodical, and completely devoid of empathy. Vidal doesn't rant or justify himself. He simply acts, which makes him horrifyingly real. Every violent moment feels intentional, not explosive. He's obsessed with legacy, order, and obedience, valuing symbols over human life. That realism hits harder than any CGI spectacle. You've met people like Vidal in history books, and that's the point. He's a villain you can't reason with, can't redeem, and can't humanize. He exists to dominate, and he does it disturbingly well. That commitment to evil makes him incredibly effective. Not flashy, not loud, just deeply unsettling. Hans Landa, Inglourious Bastards. Hans Landa doesn't need to raise his voice to control a room. He is the room. His intelligence is his weapon, and his politeness is the blade he hides it behind. Every conversation feels like a trap, slowly closing. He's charming, multilingual, and disturbingly cheerful, which only amplifies the tension. You never know if he's already 10 steps ahead, but you assume he is. Christoph Waltz plays him with surgical precision, making silence just as threatening as violence. Landa enjoys the hunt, not for ideology, but for sport. That unpredictability makes him terrifying. He's not driven by rage or loyalty, he's driven by curiosity and self-interest. When a villain steals entire scenes just by talking, you know you're dealing with something special. Hans Landa isn't just good, he's dangerously captivating. Level 6. Great. The Elite. These villains define their franchises and represent a massive hurdle for the protagonist, both physically and philosophically. Thanos, MCU. Thanos is one of the few villains who doesn't feel like an obstacle. He feels like the story. In Infinity War, he's essentially the protagonist, and that alone puts him in rare air. His goal is horrifying: but his logic is internally consistent, and worse, calmly delivered. He truly believes he's saving the universe, not conquering it. That conviction makes him unstoppable. Thanos wins, sacrifices what he loves, and walks away believing he did the right thing. That ending rewired audience expectations for blockbuster cinema. Josh Brolin's performance gives him weight, sadness, and authority, turning CGI into a genuine presence. Heroes adapt because of him. Entire franchises bend around his actions. When a villain reshapes the genre itself, you're no longer talking good, you're talking great. Anton Chigurh, No Country for Old Men. Anton Chigurh isn't a villain, he's inevitability wearing boots. He doesn't rage, doesn't boast, doesn't explain himself. He simply arrives. His calm, emotionless demeanor makes every scene unbearable with tension, because you know death is already decided. The only question is timing. The coin toss isn't mercy. It's cruelty disguised as philosophy. Chigurh believes fate is absolute, and he's just the instrument carrying it out. Javier Bardem plays him with such restraint that even silence feels threatening. There's no arc, no redemption, no lesson learned. He survives, limps away, and the world keeps spinning, uncaring. That's what makes him terrifying. You can't defeat fate, you can't reason with it. Anton Chigurh isn't memorable because of what he does, but because of what he represents. Hannibal Lecter, The Silence of the Lambs. Hannibal Lecter appears on screen for barely any time, yet completely dominates the film. That's power. He's intelligent, cultured, polite, and horrifying beneath every word. Lecter doesn't threaten Clarice. He dissects her. Every conversation feels like psychological chess, and he's always several moves ahead. What makes him great isn't just his violence, it's his control. He understands people instantly and exploits that knowledge with surgical precision. Anthony Hopkins delivers a performance so iconic that it redefined cinematic villains forever. Lecter is never loud, never frantic, never sloppy. He's patient, observant, and terrifyingly calm. Even locked behind glass, he feels more dangerous than anyone walking free. When a villain's presence lingers long after the movie ends, that's not a coincidence. That's greatness. Level 7. GOAT. The Joker, The Dark Knight. He isn't just a villain, he's chaos incarnate. Heath Ledger didn't play a clown. He embodied the philosophy of anarchy. He doesn't just want to defeat Batman, he wants to break him, and in doing so, expose the fragility of society itself. Every line, every glance, every flick of a pencil feels deliberate. His unpredictability keeps everyone and the audience constantly off balance. He's terrifying because he has no rules, no limits, and no concern for conventional morality. Ledger's performance turned the character into a legend, a villain who isn't just defeated. He's remembered, quoted, studied. When a villain redefines the genre and sets a new standard for cinematic menace, you're talking GOAT. The Joker isn't just scary, he's unforgettable. Darth Vader, Star Wars. He is the blueprint. From the hiss of his breathing to that iconic black armor, he's the standard against which every villain is measured. Vader commands the screen with presence, authority, and menace. And then there's the reveal. I am your father, which instantly cemented him in cinematic history. He's terrifying physically, psychologically, and narratively, representing both oppressive power and tragic complexity. Even decades later, his shadow dominates pop culture. Vader is the villain that every aspiring antagonist tries to emulate. He's not just memorable, he's iconic. When people think of villainy, they think of Darth Vader. End of discussion. Nurse Ratched, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. He proves that power doesn't need lasers or magic, just control, manipulation, and cold calculation. She wields bureaucracy and psychological abuse like a weapon, systematically crushing anyone who challenges her authority. Her calm, measured demeanor hides cruelty so precise it terrifies without ever raising a hand. Louise Fletcher turned subtle manipulation into a chilling performance, showing that real evil often wears a smile and a clipboard. Ratchet is the villain of realism, the one who lingers in your mind long after the movie ends, because her type exists in the real world. When a villain is both believable and unforgettable, that's GOAT territory. She doesn't just haunt the story, she haunts reality. Villains, we love to hate them, but some of them are just so bad they make you laugh instead of scream. So, which villain do you secretly root for? Or secretly want to punch in the face? Tell in comments, and don't stop here. Hit that subscribe button for more.